Welcome to the Simply Pediatrics Podcast, simplifying holistic healthcare for infants and children. We're so glad you're here. Join Jennifer Zethner, holistic pediatric nurse practitioner and holistic mom of 3 on a mission. Listen in as she shares the answers to the most asked questions from parents in her practice every day and offers parents practical strategies and actionable steps to support their child's health and well-being. Enjoy this insightful episode of the Simply Pediatrics Podcast and stay tuned for more information at the end of the podcast.
Hi, I'm Jennie Zethner. That's right, I'm here in my car. I don't know about the rest of you, but I find sitting in my car to be very peaceful. It happens to be one of the quietest places I have in my life. I have 3 children. I work full time. I'm busy like the rest of you, and I really would like to share information, and doing it from my car is most convenient. So I'm going to ask you to please forgive if there's any commotion behind me, any beeping, any dogs barking, ambulances, fire trucks, etc. I'll do the best I can to find quiet places. I assure you I will never be driving my vehicle when I speak to you. I will always be pulled over and parked. I am typically parked waiting for one of my children to come out of an event or something. So that is what I'm doing with my time here. And I look forward to sharing information with you. And again, forgive me for being a little unprofessional being here in my car, but I hope it works. And with that, let's get started.
Today's episode, Breastfeeding and Pumping.
Hi and welcome. I'm so happy to be here with you today on this rainy day to talk about breastfeeding and real specifically to talk about pumping. There's a lot of mixed information out there in regard to pumping, and I just want to share some of my personal and professional experiences in regard to pumping. So in general, I do not recommend pumping at all for the first 3 months of a baby's life, right? That fourth trimester, right? 0 to 3 months is our 4th trimester for our babies. So I don't recommend any pumping. So ideally, I'm going to put an asterisk over that and explain to you some of the reasons why you might have to. But ideally, no pumping at all. All right? The asterisk is because sometimes we have babies who aren't latching adequately, so we're not gaining weight, so we're not, for one reason or another, the baby's not transferring milk from mom, so we need to pump. Other reasons, mom has in a lot of pain, which is usually a tongue tie, but mom's having a lot of pain, so she can't get the baby to latch, so she has to pump. Those are the exception. So those are not the situations that I'm talking about. Today, I am just talking about our babies who are moving along, who are on the breast, who are getting the milk they need, having the wet diapers, the bowel movements, gaining weight, and mom isn't having any pain with the latch. And then I'll have mom say, I want to pump. And then I say, why, right? So I always want to know what their intentions are. And I want to support you on your reasons, right? So here's some of the reasons I hear from moms as to why they want to pump. Moms are looking to start pumping under 3 months old. They'll tell me, well, I want dad to be able to give a bottle or grandma to be able to give a bottle. All right. Or they say, I just want to pump because I want to make sure I have enough. Okay, we're going to address that. Or they'll tell me, well, I want to pump because I really just want to build up a supply. So when I have to leave the baby, I have a supply. All right, to all of those, and I'm going to address each of them differently, but to each of those, if you start pumping under 3 months, for whatever the reasons are, if you start pumping under 3 months, you really do sort of disrupt what is called a, supply and demand system, right? So the breastfeeding is supply and demand. And what does that mean? That means the baby is the demand, right? Every time the baby goes on to the breast, it demands from the mommy to make the milk, right? And an incredible chemical reaction occurs in our bodies, moms, because we're amazing beings, right? So our baby latches onto us. These chemicals are released up into our brains, triggers the body to make milk. Amazing. So you want that ideally to be pretty, if you want to stay in rhythm with your baby. So you really don't want to start that pumping until 3 months so that you stay in rhythm. If you start to interject a pumping session before 3 months, if you start to pump before then and just kind of randomly, pump in and see what's going on, you mess up that flow. You mess up that supply and demand system. So when are you pumping, right? So if in the first 3 months of life, a baby can really nurse anytime they want, the schedules are gone, right? Schedules are really gone the first 3 months. And that's why I don't recommend the pumping, because you really don't know when your baby's gonna sleep, wake, nurse. They're entitled to nurse whenever they want to. So if you just nursed your baby and you put them down, you're like, okay, well, now I'm gonna go pump. And then say maybe you pump out a little bit and then the baby wakes up. Well, it's not ideal anymore, because now he wants to be back on you and perhaps the milk supply isn't there. Some women have lots and lots of supply and this doesn't apply to them, but for the majority of women, we have the milk that we need for our babies and not an oversupply. So if you pump kind of randomly and then your baby wakes up, well, now you've kind of taken the milk out of the breast that the baby needs, and sort of can be like a runaway train, right? So then maybe you have to give them the bottle, etc. Right? So there's that issue. There's the issue of we don't really know when you can pump, because we don't know when the baby's going to nurse again. And it's not a faucet, it's supply and demand. The other issue is that for some women who start pumping early on, they can make an oversupply. So now you're at risk for like mastitis, or you kind of become a slave to keeping up with that pumping, because now you've told your body, make all this milk. I'm pumping. So the body's saying, okay, I guess I got to make a lot more milk than what the baby's demanding. And then you have to keep up with that. Otherwise you're real uncomfortable. And again, risk of mastitis. All right, so those are kind of the common issues that occur if we start pumping too early. So now to get to mommy and daddy's, mom and dad's question. So I want to pump so daddy can give a bottle. All right, so let's talk about that. Are you having, some moms, like their emotional health is at risk. Okay, so we need mommy to sleep, then we need daddy to give a bottle, and then maybe that makes sense. We'll figure out how to pump in a way that makes sense so that dad can give that bottle, because mom's emotional health is a factor here and she needs to sleep. So I'll ask mom that question. And if her answer is, well, no, dad just wants to give the bottle. Okay, that's wonderful that dad wants to participate. Obviously, it's wonderful. But I'll have to give you some of like the other sides to that, right? So babies that are introduced, babies that get a bottle early on in life are at much higher risk to wean from the breast, because the bottles are just easier, right? So if a baby gets a bottle early on in life, they're at higher risk to wean off the breast sooner. That's all there is to it. Do moms do it successfully? Sure, absolutely. But that is kind of like the risk that you run into. And really kind of staying in rhythm with our babies, that is, breastfeeding on demand helps our supply optimally in those first 3 months. So if you're giving, if you want dad to give the bottle because he wants to, well, then it's really not so much about dad. Like there's other things that dad can be doing right now. We really want mom to be comfortable with what's happening here. Or if there's other family members, say a grandma who wants to be able to give a bottle, it's not really appropriate, right? Moms, if you want to be breastfeeding and you want to be with your baby and you don't mind waking up at night, which most of us don't. Honestly, I have 3 kids. Yes, we get exhausted, but in those first bunch of months, it's really kind of exciting and we want to be with them. Again, there's always an exception to that for some moms whose emotional health is at risk. So answer that honestly yourselves, moms. Do you really want to pump so that dad can give the bottle? Is that truly what you're doing? Or are you doing that for him? Or are you doing that for your mother-in-law or for your mom? And to which I say, maybe kind of wait, let's hold off a little bit, because it can disrupt this flow that you have going on here. All right. The other reason moms will tell me they want to pump is because I want to know how much is in there. This isn't really a reflection on how much milk you have, because I'll have moms who are breastfeeding beautifully with these big plump babies that are doing amazing, and then they're upset because they'll say, well, I don't know, I pumped and I didn't get anything. And I say, well, that's not really an indicator of how much milk you have. Like, let's look at your baby. We're making bowel movements, we're urinating, we're gaining weight, we have a content baby. You've got plenty of milk, right? And as you move along, by the way, moms, once we get past that 6-week mark and you're in rhythm with your baby, you might not feel that fullness anymore. And some women mistake that for I'm not making any milk. That's not the case, right? Look at your baby and how they're doing, and that's the indicator of how well and how much milk you have for your infant. And in fact, if your infant is really eating very well and you're in rhythm with them, meaning you're making the milk that your baby needs, when you pump, there's not going to be much there, right? Because remember, it's a supply and demand system. So if you go in and interject a pumping session, you might not actually get as much milk as you think that you should, right? That's rarely, like I say that in quotation marks, like you should. There's not really an amount. There's no number that we should be pumping out. It doesn't really make any sense. So pumping really isn't like an indicator of how well a milk producer a woman is. It really just is not. So when moms say that they wanted to see how much they're making, I try to give them reassurance that that's really just not an indicator, especially under the 3-month mark of, checking, and it's not necessary either. All right. And then the other reason why we want to pump is to build up a stash. I have women who are like, I just want to build up that stash of milk because I want to get out to dinner with my husband. I love that. Nothing is more important than mom and dad bonding and being together. So absolutely. However, right, in the first 3 months of life, it's not all that practical to really be away from your baby for too long, right? So the first 3 months, they're completely reliant on us. The first 3 months, they're allowed to kind of nurse whenever they want. They're cluster feeding. You're still healing, right? Your adrenal glands, your nervous system is still kind of adjusting to this new life that you have. So more appropriate might be to have a date night with the baby, perhaps, or to leave the baby for like shorter periods of time if you in those first 3 months, if you and dad want to get away and leave the baby with a loved one. So if you want to build up, quote unquote, build up a supply so that you have a little bit so that you can get away from your baby with dad for a little while, using a haka, which is a device that sort of like rests on one breast while the baby's feeding off of the other, is a really nice way to passively sort of collect milk. You can collect small amounts over like a long period of time, which could equate to like one little bottle that you have kind of stashed away, if you would. A haka isn't pumping, it's kind of just collecting. So it's collecting milk that otherwise might have been sort of lost. And some women will wear them on both breasts throughout the day because they claim, they'll say like, I'm leaking all the time. Well, and they want to collect that. So you can collect it and keep it. And that's different than pumping. That's sort of just like collecting the milk that otherwise would have been wasted. And that's a really good way to just have like a little storage backup for yourself if you plan on kind of getting away for a little bit from your baby. And again, in the first 3 months, I do really encourage moms to be okay with this. This is 3 months that when you look back will be like a zip in time, nothing. It feels like a long time right now, but getting in rhythm with your baby and staying present is really important, which is why support is so important. Making sure in those first 3 months, mom and partner have support around them. People who are coming into the house and helping with meals, people who are helping with laundry, etc., and kind of helping out in those first 3 months, because it's a lot of work. And I always say after the 3rd month, we have an infant who, they're holding their head up, they're looking at you, they're smiling, they're a little bit more interactive. You have a little bit of rhythm to your day, right? A 3-month-old is waking up and playing with nursing and then hanging out a little bit and then nursing again and going back to sleep, and repeat that until the afternoon, and then the schedule kind of falls apart. But when you reach that 3-month mark, you should have some semblance of what I like to say order. Like you kind of know what's happening next. You might be able to step out for an hour or so at that point because we have like a little schedule with our babies. Prior to 3 months, not too much schedule. A little bit. It's the work. It's the work, and that's why you need all the support. Ideally, if we can get to the 3-month mark, and then we have moms that are, returning back to work, or they want to start to pump to build up, quote unquote, that stash of milk for when they do return to work, or they have to go away, or they're planning to go to a party or whatever. The best time to start pumping would be at the 3 months where, like I said, you usually have some sort of schedule and you can build in a pumping session. So what you're essentially telling your body is make some milk during this time, the same time every day, and the body should respond by having excess milk at that time. And what does that look like logistically? That's your baby wakes up in the morning, nurses, hangs out with you, nurses again, goes to sleep, and maybe during that nap there, you are pumping there. It's better to do it in the morning than at night for sure. We definitely have a bigger supply in the morning, and that would be consecutive. So if you're doing it at the same time each day, you should be able to trigger the body to make, more milk, and pumping for at least 10 to 15 minutes will do that. Some pumps are better than others. If you try to use a pump and it's not working, you might want to try, a stronger, a different brand, etc. I got to tell you, a lot of women say like the handheld one really is like the most adequate. So don't underestimate that one either. All right, that is it for today, all my breastfeeding mamas. I hope this information was helpful for you. Remember, your child's health is a journey, and you're doing an amazing job. Stay curious, stay knowledgeable, and I will see you next time.
Thank you for joining joining Jennie on the Simply Pediatrics Podcast. We hope that the valuable information she's shared in this episode will inspire and empower you on your holistic parenting journey. If you would like to learn more about Jennie, her Simply Pediatrics practice, or anything that she spoke about today, please check the show notes that accompany this podcast and you'll find all the links and resources you need. You can also sign up for the Simply Pediatrics mailing list so that you receive Jennie's weekly newsletters packed with vital information and holistic parenting journeys. If you've enjoyed today's episode, please consider giving this page a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any episodes. And don't forget to connect with us by sharing your thoughts in the comments section below. Follow Simply Pediatrics on any and all of the social media platforms. And if you're interested in an in-person or a virtual appointment with Jennie, please see the contact details in the show notes. Stay tuned for more episodes packed with a wealth of powerful information to support you on your holistic parenting path. See you next time.